Hey everyone, welcome to the Horror Show. I'm Cecil Laird.
Fuego here.
And we are here to do a Halloween flavored comic book review, you guys. We are here to review Trick or Treat Days of the Dead. We both have our trades, although I tell you what, I just purchased mine. I didn't even know this existed until I got my Krampus trade about a year ago when I did the Krampus review for Christmas.
Yeah, which I have too.
Yeah, exactly. But mine came in the mail, it was all jacked up. The guy shipped it with a cardboard, like one sliver of cardboard that was half the size of the comic.
Asshole.
Such a jerk. But anyway, so here we go. We're going to go through this. Now, as Fuego just confirmed via a little bit of research, because Fuego is the research man here at the Horror Show, we discovered that while this was originally intended to be 4 separate issues, an anthology comic book series, as it were, appropriately enough, of course, for Trick or Treat, it actually ended up only coming out in this trade format. So it is 4 issues worth of material that was released just in this trade. And to give proper credit, just so we do right up front, the story is by Michael Dougherty, Todd Casey, and Zach Shields, all 3 the same people that did the Krampus trade as well. And then written by Michael Dougherty, Todd Casey, Zach Shields, and they brought in Mark Andreyko this time, who's a really cool author.
Yeah, and I guess he was the one who adapted the film originally into a comic format, and then this was the sequel series that, as they say on the back, was supposed to be kind of a bridging device before we get the sequel, and there's still not been a Trick or Treat sequel, although Michael Dougherty did say last year in October of 2017 that after he's done with all the Godzilla stuff, his next project hopefully is going to be the Trick or Treat sequel. He hopes to finish writing it when he's in post-production, so fingers firmly crossed that we will get to see this sequel film at least at some point in time.
And it's funny, in the foreword he mentions a little bit about that, and he says, hopefully this will tide you over until I can get to Trick or Treat, and this came out in 2011. And I'm like, oh, Michael, you don't even know what you're talking about. You have big things in your future.
Yes, much larger than he was anticipating, I would imagine. But
literally going from a little person, child, evil thing, all the way to kaiju. That's quite the size difference.
Oh yeah, massive in fact. But he did some co-writing on the X-Men Apocalypse script. It looked like Krampus was well received in 2015. So he's been biding his time. Hopefully just more time for it to simmer. That big old kettle pot of whatever. Hopefully it'll be badass. But this was an interesting collection, I gotta say. 4 stories, which if I remember, the original movie was 4 stories, right?
I believe so, plus the wraparound.
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, this one actually kind of blends the wraparound in with one of them, and it's really a wraparound only in as much as it appears at the beginning of the first issue and the beginning of the last issue.
It's like a page or 2 and that's it.
Yeah. But again, to give proper credit, the art is done by 4 different artists throughout the stories. So the first story called Seed, the art is done by someone that is actually enormous now in the comic book independent world, Fiona Staples. And what Fiona Staples has done for the last 50 issues, I think they're up to now, is a book called Saga, which was written by Brian K. Vaughan, who any of you guys know is a massive, any big comic book fan knows, is a massive comic book writer. He did an outstanding Eisner Award-winning graphic novel called The Pride of Baghdad, which is kind of like The Lion King if it took place in a war-torn Baghdad. And then he also
did Why the Last Man.
Yep.
Yeah.
Why the Last Man, as well as a bunch of DC stuff, including touching on Batman. He did once or twice, but he's done a lot of really cool things. I don't know if you're looking up his bibliography there, but the colors in that one are done by Jose Villarrubia. And then the second story is Corn Maiden, art and colors by Stephen Byrne. And then Echoes is the third story, art by Stuart Sager and colors by Guy Major. And then the final story is Monster Mash, art and colors by Zid, and colors also by Ricardo Rolo. So that is the creative teams. Now let's start off with Seed, Fuego. Well, first the wraparound, which is one page of
Yeah.
a grandfather carving a pumpkin on the front steps of their house on Halloween night while she is supposed to be getting ready to go trick-or-treating with her friends.
Yep, and his granddaughter's all spooked and stuff, and he's trying to almost explain to her that it's not that scary of an evening. He explains that, there's like different significance to it, and it's where people can actually, embrace their inner creepiness and dress and be zany and everything and not be judged for it, kind of. And so...
So what did you think of this first story that came afterwards, Fuego? Why don't you go through this one and maybe I'll tackle the next one.
Yeah, I did. I honestly did enjoy the art quite a bit. I thought it was cool. That was done by Fiona. What was her name again?
Fiona Staples.
Fiona Staples. And so it's back to Ireland in the 1600s and the witch hunts and things like that were going down. And so there's this one gentleman named Thomas, if I remember correctly, and he's been indoctrinated, but he doesn't completely buy into every aspect of it. And you can tell that this woman he's supposed to be assisting with the torture with and presumed eventual, burning of, he's kind of fallen for her a wee bit. And yet you're still initially not really supposed to know if her intentions are mischievous, if she's as bad as she's been marked out to be, or if, there's a conviction. And so, they end up having this little romance kind of thing. And it's funny how I guess they call him Sam Hain, right? They don't pronounce it as Seween for the mascot character, but he kind of pops up in all four of these stories, and you do see him at one particular time in this. And it's all about kind of trying to get this seed to the new world, so to speak, and how and he actually gets supremely sick at one point in time, and you're led to believe maybe that she's the one who cast some sort of spell on him, and then she kind of helps out in kind of curing him, so to speak. But still, they're in a terrible position, and some that stuff goes down. It's a little rough, but you do kind of, even in the fact that it's only like 15, 20 pages maybe, you still get the essence of the fact that, there was a true connection there, and that she wasn't as horrible as, as witches are painted to be. So they do show kind of a sympathetic side to the witchcraft, and witches are kind of, through many of the stories here, a kind of underlining theme, and they pop up a few times, not just in this story. And do you see this particular pumpkin seed that's trying to make its way across the pond and stuff later in the story? And so, I don't know, it actually had a little bit of power to it, despite the fact that it's very condensed and just brisk storytelling. And once again, I did really like the art in this one. What were your thoughts, man?
I liked this one. I thought it was a little... I don't know. I was a little underwhelmed by the story the first time I read it through, but I kind of flipped back through it again afterwards, and I liked it a little bit more, and I kind of got the idea, because this takes place in and around when the holiday actually began. So that was kind of the thing, and it shows that the origin of Little Sam is, along with the origin of the holiday. And what was kind of cool was like the seeds trying to make it to America is also kind of like the mysticality of Sam and the Halloween spirit making its way to America as well. Like the representativeness of that was really cool.
Yeah, it's Ireland 1640, as I just double checked and stuff like that. And obviously these were tales that came in a lot of ways from Europe, at least, and then made their way over to the New World and everything. And that's exactly what ends up transpiring. And we're not going to say what fate befalls our main characters or anything, but I don't know, I thought it had just kind of an eerie beauty to it of sorts, especially like some of the art in the last few pages I really enjoyed. So.
It's something different. This whole book, I will say, and Doherty actually touches on it in his foreword at the beginning of the book, is that, the movie was all about intertwining stories in a small sort of Halloween setting. He said he wanted the book to be something different. It's stories that are sort of thematically linked, but that take place across time throughout the evolution of the holiday itself. So he purposely made it a little bit different, so it plays differently. It's not like 4 stories that are going to tie together, and you're going to see characters from other stories walk through like you did in the movie. which they masterfully did in the movie.
Love the movie.
But yeah, so in the second story, we move on to Illinois in 1853, which is obviously the Old West when we are still settling the U.S., and it's actually part of the gold rush. And there's this particular character, a man who is traveling with his daughter and his, friends and accomplices, business partners, one would assume. They've gotten wind of this area that's supposed to be gold rich, and they're going to try and stake their claim. Turns out there is a tribe of Indians already occupying the land, and we also find out that the man and his daughter have recently lost the female in their lives, the wife and mother.
Yeah.
And so he's doing his best, kind of, but she's not really able to have a childhood because they're not traveling with any other children as they do this. So when they get to the Indian reservation, they actually show up with gifts, and they ask to talk to the chief. And here, I'm going to show you a little bit of the artwork as I do this, because what's really cool is it's a very bold lined, bold colored, animated style almost.
Yeah, and that was immediately what I thought was animation, man. When I
really loved it. I really loved this particular style of art in the book, and so it's cool. They meet this tribe, and you think everything's kind of on the up and up. He actually requests to speak with the chief, and while he does so, while he and the chief go off and speak, his daughter goes off and explores and finds some interesting stuff. She finds this their shaman of the tribe, and then she also meets the chief's daughter, and they sort of start talking and have this really cool sort of bonding interaction and everything, and it's really neat. I really enjoyed how this story was told. It's told like an animated movie almost, except it gets uber dark, So basically, the meeting with the chief doesn't go super great, and they end up riding away, and the little girl sneaks away that night and goes back and actually hangs out with the tribe, and they accept her in because she's so young, and they kind of teach her their ways because she's curious about it. And the next day she goes back home, or goes back to to her father and everything, and he stops her and is like, "You went back there, didn't you?" And she's like, "Yes," and she's afraid, but he's like, "Don't worry about it. We might have overreacted. We want to respect their culture, and here, because she had talked about how she wanted to tell them about Halloween. He's like, "Here, take some Halloween to them," and basically she does, and takes them candies and vegetables and things like that, and they have this little Halloween celebration, and things don't end up the way that you think. Turns out the father is super underhanded. Things get very, very, very dark, and you're basically the young girl Dark Willow's out, for those of you familiar with Buffyverse.
That she does, and it's interesting because the father almost uses her as a pawn to some degree for his own end. And
almost completely does.
Completely does, and he also uses the fact that the widow, the mother, that is deceased, she loved Halloween, and that preys on the love of the daughter, and just the sentimental aspect and the close connection and whatnot. And yeah, I thought the end art, especially in this, when you see just the nature of what ends up going down after some candy is used to mischievous means, it's kind of nutsoid. I admit I wasn't really digging the story too much until the climax. I honestly had some issues with the dialogue in it. It felt a little too modern, some of the discussion amongst the characters, and not only that, it felt kind of garnered towards the tween, like a younger audience almost. It was very simplistic and whatnot, but the themes, and that dark aspect that you were mentioning once they finally got to it, I'm like, oh, okay, there's the payoff that makes me like anthology horror so much, is the fact that they actually, went somewhere a little nastier, and I thought that was cool. So
yeah. So why don't you go through story number 3?
Story number 3 was actually my favorite in this.
Really?
Oh yeah, this was my favorite, especially the artwork. I'm not sure, it was this...
Damn, it was 4 was my favorite all the way, I'll say that much. And not only that, but... What?
Yeah, that was my least favorite, probably. Damn. I don't know, I wasn't too fun for... Number three is a story called Echoes, and we jump about another near 100 years or so, and it's L.A. 1955. We're
Noir.
talking Back to the Future year, and it's just interesting because you have this particular gumshoe, and he's a private investigator, and he gets consulted by this mysterious woman to help find her missing sister. She implores him that nobody else is willing to take the case, and she offers this fatty sum of money. And he's just like, well, if you're going to offer me that amount of money, I'll go find a fat kid in the Congo. And so he takes up the case, and apparently there's some tie-ins with a bigwig movie mogul who she had been seen with before. And but yet, as he does all of his investigations, he's going to different bars and different places that she used to frequent. Everybody's saying the same thing, that they haven't seen her in weeks. And he does eventually, after some persistence, track this movie guy down, this producer of sorts, I guess. And you find out some of the weird shizzle that he is into, and we tie in more with witchcraft once again, which is kind of interesting. And he also, loss is another theme that is explored a lot in all of these stories, and he's lost, wife and children and stuff, and so that's something that's weighing very heavily on him. And it does play a factor in the story, especially once we get to the supernatural aspect of it, without really, spelling everything out too well. But I don't know this is just such a weird, splotchy kind of art style.
Yeah,
I enjoyed it so much, but it's very dark in my opinion, and it's got a very surreal hand paint aspect, whereas like the previous one looked animated and like there was probably a lot of digital use. This one looked much more like it was just lots of pencils and paint and stuff like that instead. And
very heavy. They were going for a very heavy noir feel, so it's
exactly.
Oozing with shadows. Every page is super heavy with shadows. And it is very scratchy, sort of almost artwork. Like it's not super defined, bold edges and lines and things like that. Like, but it works for the story. I hate noir detective stuff.
Oh,
I really don't like. It's so boring to me. Like the only one I've ever been able to deal with is Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and that's because it's got a bunch of different aspects to it that I can get behind.
Yeah, I like that. I like the Kubrick stuff that he did in the 50s. I like Chinatown. I like Naked Lunch that Cronenberg did with Peter Weller. I mean, I've always enjoyed this kind of approach, and I love the art once he actually gets to this like seance kind of thing that's going down. All the costumes on the people I think are really rad and spooky and stuff. And
there's our Samio right there.
Yeah. That's what, once again, as we said, he makes
it's a Sam cameo. You like that?
The Samio, yeah. And he just makes his brief little appearance. He never becomes a main character in any of these, like we do eventually see in the feature film. Whereas he just kind of pops up here and there in all of the other stories, and that's more of the vibe up. And that's when we're finally finding this missing woman and stuff. And there's I can't say the twist at the end of the nature of the sister was unexpected in any way, shape, or form. It's like this big reveal, and you're just like, yeah, I saw that a mile away. But even so,
cool artwork.
I dig the artwork so much in this. It was the most up my alley as far as just, I don't know. It seemed like the most adult work, the most adult artwork in this entire thing, at least for me. So
fair enough.
Yeah.
I wasn't as big of a fan of it, obviously. Like I said, not a big fan of noir crime stories. I actually thought the artwork was too muddy at times, and I couldn't follow exactly what was going on, so I didn't like having to sort of decode it page by page.
It is a little splotchy.
This if you go back and watch a lot of the comic reviews I've done on the channel, this is the kind of artwork that Dirk really gets behind. I am not a big fan of this kind of artwork. I like the more bold line stuff that almost looks animated. I always have. The next story is pure digital artwork the whole way, but it's very reminiscent of Clayton Crane, who I really, really love and has done some amazing Venom and Carnage and Spider-Man stuff. Look up the artist Clayton Crane, Fuego, and you'll see how similar it is. Because of the digital boldness and everything. So this story is called Monster Mash, and it's essentially, it doesn't give a date, so we're assuming it takes place sort of today-ish, which would have been 2011 when this was released. And you start off with a couple of kids who are kind of just raising hell on Halloween, early Halloween night, and they're kicking over pumpkins and painting up lawn gnomes and things like that, and they get caught by a group of adults, including one of their father, who happens to be the local priest or pastor. What's the difference, Fuego?
It depends if you're Catholic or if you are Christian.
Do they both wear white collars, though?
No, I don't believe white collars are worn by pastors.
Okay,
so we're
it's
talking
a priest, then.
Talking to priest, yeah. Clayton Crane, I like it.
Yeah,
Very
he's
cool.
really, really cool. But you see the similarity to the sort of the digital style of this artwork?
I totally do. And this is actually the same artwork that we see on the cover of the actual trade itself. So,
right. Yeah, actually from this particular story. I didn't even put that together. You're right. But yeah, so there's, the father is abusive, and that little kid sort of shines him on, his son. But what's kind of interesting is, right after they get caught, all of a sudden they're all attacked by a bunch of different monsters. And if you look, it's like all different kinds. You got werewolves, you got big giant bats, you got Frankensteins, you got like everything, or Frankenstein's monsters, and witches even, and they all attack. But because the kids are wearing costumes, they sort of just sniff and leave the kids alone. Like right over there, you can see it. And so the adults rush off to go to the church to hide out and, pray and everything. But the kid, the troublemaking kid tells his friend, he's like, when are we ever going to get another opportunity like this? So they basically end up hanging out with the monsters for the night, just kind of going quickly through it at this point. They see the gathering of all the monsters, they're having fun, and so they put on their masks and they join them. And it's almost like a Where the Wild Things Are sort of thing.
A little bit.
Where they, they're playing on the shoulders of of scarecrows that are walking the streets. They're, tossing candy down to their friends from the back of witches' brooms. They're having all this sort of Halloween flavored fun, and it's just really, really interesting for me. I thought the fun and games of this story were excellent and so much fun to watch. And so, but what they discover not too long into the night is that their bodies are starting to change. Sort of along the lines of Little Monsters, when the Wonder Years kid, Fred Savage, starts to become a little bit monstrous, right? When he stays down there too long, doesn't he start to grow horns or something?
A little bit. I was thinking of this Goosebumps book where it's like something about a haunted mask. I'm like looking here for the name of it.
Oh, I've seen that cover a million times. Yeah.
Yeah. Long story short, the kid puts the mask on and it like fuses to his face and he starts to change. And so this had some similar vibes to that for me.
Clown, a little bit of clown in there.
Yes.
Recently.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
So one of the kids gets concerned while the troublemaker doesn't care as much. He's like, okay, well, let's just do one more thing. And then they basically have all the monsters attack the church, and they come bursting through the window, and all of the adults essentially get attacked by all these different creatures. And afterward, basically the troublemaking kid tells the little kid that he's just gonna end up staying with the monsters, and the little kid has no choice but to let him go. And what's cool is they show early on that that there's actually not only just ghosts and ghouls and all this stuff, there's actually some big cheese bad guys there as well. I'll show you the biggest one. That was such a cool piece of art. I love this rendition of Death. Dude, this rendition of Death is always going to be my favorite. The classic Reaper with the big old scythe looks so dope. And so when the kid goes at the end, he basically walks into Death's robe and kind of disappears. And then the story flashes back to the grandfather, and the little girl's feeling better now, and she's okay. She goes and puts on her costume to go trick-or-treating with her kids. Then she walks off, and basically the grandfather like looks up in the sky and sees this big creature sort of shadow cross the moon and then land right in front of him, and he basically says hi to his old friend. He's like, it's been a long time, and then he basically walks towards him, and then it kind of cuts to black. And so you're assuming that this is the grandfather's last Halloween that he had, and he basically gets to go join his friend. And dude,
and you know what's funny? That was something that on the initial read I didn't pick up on until you mentioned it right now.
Oh, really?
That makes me think that is him as a boy, and he lost his friend, you know, Rory or whatever.
That's exactly.
Yeah, exactly. It's 2 and 2 I didn't put together when I was reading it late last night.
Oh, really? Yeah, because
that makes me like it a whole lot more, honestly.
Yeah, he walks up to him and he even says, he's like, it's been a long time, old friend.
Yeah.
And he says, Happy Halloween, and he walks into his arms. So he's finally joining his friend to go to the Halloween party. Dude, that got me so hard as such a big Halloween and horror lover. Yeah. Like, to imagine having had, you know, like, that really is a beautiful Halloween lover's story. That issue alone made this trade, I think it's worth anyone's purchase just for that issue alone, as a Halloween lover that can still access the childlike part of themselves. Because I, as such a big Halloween fan, I imagine the loss. Like, I imagine if I lost producer Dave when we were kids because he was in an abusive home and he chose to live with the monsters instead, to have this sort of permanent Halloween, and then I grow all the way old again and I get to see him again, you know, and like, I'm gonna get teary up just thinking about it, because that kind of story really gets to me, man. And like, and it wasn't like a real scary story unless you're a shitty adult that doesn't believe in Halloween magic, you know. Like, it really is the Halloween version of A Wonderful Christmas Story.
Kinda similar themes, especially in the end. And for me, it was a very simple story, and you know, so maybe that's why I wasn't so hot on it when I was initially reading it last night. But as we're discussing it now, and just especially with the little light bulb going off on top of my head about the childhood connection, that's when I'm just like, okay, yeah, this was a lot better than I think I was initially judging it. And the artwork is very cool. All the different creatures are dope. It's a nice assortment and stuff. And you know, despite the simplicity, yeah, it's got it has that, it's like got that sweet candy core to it of sorts. So
it really does. And again, that candy corn core.
Yes.
Appropriate enough. But yeah, it's that story made it worth it. I really liked the second story, the animated one. It sounds like you liked 1 and 3 best. I liked 2 and 4 best.
Yeah.
So I mean,
those are the ones we got to talk extensively about then.
Yeah, I mean, consider that, you guys. I mean, it's a true anthology, and so some of you are gonna like some stories better than others, just like most anthologies that come out. You're gonna find some stories stronger than others. I found the same thing. He found the same thing. It just so happens that we found opposite stories in the opposite ways. So there you go.
Yeah, I still think you can't argue that the strongest story in the original Trick or Treat film, though, is the bus at the bottom of the cliff or whatever it was, because I just love that story.
I actually would disagree with you on that. I would go. Oh! I think I would go with the pumpkin head carving story.
The first one. Okay.
The kid, yeah. But honestly, the werewolves is pretty good too. But the vampire guy's kind of weak, so I like the.
Well, and then I guess maybe there was more than one. I guess there were, because then there was also the last one with the bus driver.
The old man, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So.
Well, if you're considering the bus and the old man as one, then I would say that's the best story. But you got to kind of take them a little separate and just take the tie-in at the end.
Damn it! Now I want more Trick or Treat.
I know, me too. It's honestly, it's my favorite anthology movie I've ever seen. So,
I struggle to think of something I like better, at least right off the top of my head.
I've been seeing more news about a Southbound director, so I really been wanting to watch that. I don't know where you rank that.
It's up there for me, but it's another one where, I mean, not every story is as strong as the other. So
we should do a top 5 horror anthologies.
I'd love to do that. You know how much I love horror anthologies, man.
Let's put that together. Would have been good for Halloween, but that's okay. We can do Scarevember or whatever.
Yeah, I've been wanting to watch Tales from Halloween or Tales of Halloween. That was
Me
another
too.
one.
I want to rewatch the hell out of that.
tried to do a similar thing to this, except with way more stories and with different directors for each one. So that's another one I would recommend. All right.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for our review of Trick or Treat Days of the Dead. Let us know in the comments down below if this is something you guys think you're going to investigate, or if we ruined enough that you don't need to. But I'd be interested to hear if you guys have even heard of this or not. So let us know in the comments down below. While you're down there, click the link in the description box for our Patreon. You can join up and support the channel that way. If you do so, you can choose movies for us to review. Also, you can even pick some comics for us to review if you want. I'm not against that at all. Also, start being able to join in on some live streams, all that good stuff. Again, that's at the Patreon link down below. Until next time, though, I've been Cecil Laird.
Gracias, JAime and Fuego.
Happy Halloween, and remember... Stay scared.